That night, I told my father the truth. My stepmother's cousin tried to kiss me in the kitchen. She smiled for everyone, but when the door closed, she hissed that I was a liar, her voice cold steel. The next morning, I found his wallet under her pillow. Inside, a hotel keycard under a fake name. I work in risk assessment, and I know how to keep the truth intact until it's time to go public. My name is Mara Kent. I am 28 years old, and I lead the risk analysis team for the Eastern Seaboard at Norcrest Dynamics. My world is one of muted grays and pressurized glass. High up in the Grayford City skyline, I live in data. I find patterns in chaos. I model worst-case scenarios, and I build firewalls, digital, financial, and procedural. My job isn't to predict the future. It's to quantify the cost of a bad decision. In my world, emotion is a variable to be isolated, a liability. A number that doesn't add up is a threat. A smile that doesn't reach the eyes is a data point. My stepmother, Celia Vance, is the head of communications for all of Norcrest. She is the antithesis of my function. Where I mitigate risk, she generates narrative. She sells the why of Norcrest Dynamics. She's 45, impeccable, all sharp angles and expensive. Architectural dresses. Her voice is like warm honey over polished stone. The board adores her. They see her can-do attitude, her relentless optimism, her ability to frame a quarterly loss as a strategic realignment. She is the face of the company's perceived integrity. I am the plumbing, the code beneath the interface, checking the math. We work in the same building. We nod in the elevator. Two professionals sharing a commute. But at home, in my father's house, the house I moved into to be closer to the office, we are something else. The friction point arrived 3 weeks ago, packaged as an opportunity. His name was Evan Moore. Celia introduced him in the third-floor executive lounge, her hand resting proprietorially on his forearm. "This is my brilliant cousin, Evan," she'd announced to the executive team. "He's the genius brand consultant I told you about." He was set to consult on Legacy Week, Celia's pet project, a massive internal and external campaign designed to celebrate Norcrest's family values and corporate history. I ran his name. It was procedural. Any new vendor, especially one consulting on a high-visibility project, crosses my desk. Evan Moore, freelance. His submitted proposal was heavy on buzzwords: synergy, brand actualization, narrative authenticity, and light on metrics. I noted the anomaly, but Celia had already pushed his provisional contract through. He was family, she'd argued. A formality. I flagged it. Potential conflict of interest. Nepotistic, I wrote in the file. But I didn't escalate. Not yet. It was just a data point. The party was one of Celia's meticulously curated events. My father, a senior board member, beamed as Celia drifted through their sterile, open-plan living room, refilling glasses, laughing that musical laugh. It was a networking event disguised as a house party, filled with Grayford business leaders and Norcrest executives. I was present because my absence would be noted. Evan Moore was there, charming, holding court by the fireplace. He was exactly Celia's type, not of cousin, but of man, sleek, confident, wearing a watch that cost more than my first car. I was clearing plates, a task I defaulted to, a way to be busy without engaging. I was at the deep stainless steel sink in the kitchen. Back to the room, the sound of ice clinking and low murmuring conversation behind me. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The ambient sound was blocked. He was standing directly behind me. Evan. I could smell the expensive, peppery cologne and the whiskey on his breath. "The dutiful daughter," he whispered, his voice too close to my ear. I didn't turn. "Just cleaning up, Evan." "You're all business, aren't you, Mara? All spreadsheets and risk models?" His hand grazed my lower back. I stiffened, my knuckles turning white on the wine glass I was rinsing. "That's inappropriate," I said, my voice low, flat. "Is it?" he challenged. "Celia says you're wound too tight. Maybe you just need someone to help you. Relax." Before I could process the violation, he spun me around. His grip was strong on my arm. He was smiling, a predator's smile, and then his mouth was on mine. It was wet, invasive, tasting of whiskey and entitlement. A cold shock of rage went through me. I didn't scream. I shoved, hard. I shoved him back against the marble island. The thud of his body hitting the counter was satisfyingly solid. He stumbled, regaining his balance, the smile gone, replaced by a flash of annoyance. I was wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, my whole body vibrating with controlled fury, and that's when I saw her. Celia, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room. She hadn't just arrived. She had been watching. She saw me push him. She saw me scrubbing my lips. Our eyes met across the kitchen. She didn't rush over. She didn't look angry. She didn't look concerned. She held my gaze, and then, very slowly, a faint, cool smile touched the corners of her perfect, red lipsticked mouth. It was a smile of acknowledgement, a smile that said, "I see you, and it doesn't matter." Then she turned, fluid as a cat, and glided back into the party. I waited until the last car pulled away, the sound of its engine fading into the suburban silence. My father, blissfully oblivious, had already gone upstairs, trusting Celia to lock up. The house was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the wine fridge. Celia was in the foyer, slipping off her heels. She didn't look at me as I approached. "Celia," I said. My voice was steady. It always is. "We need to talk about what happened with Evan." She turned. The hostess mask was gone. Her face was pale, hard. "We don't," she said. "He cornered me. He tried to kiss me in your kitchen." "He kissed you, Mara," she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous vibration. "Don't be dramatic. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me." "He is a vendor for Norcrest. I am an employee. That is harassment. His contract—" "This isn't the office." She took a step toward me. "This is my home. This is your father's home. Do you have any idea what you could do?" "What I could do? He's the one who—" "You will stop," she commanded. She closed the heavy oak front door. The click of the deadbolt sounded unnaturally loud. "You will not breathe a word of this. Not to your father. Not to HR. Not to anyone. Evan is family. He is crucial to the Legacy Week launch. You will not ruin the family reputation over one clumsy, drunken pass." "It wasn't a pass, Celia. And he's not just family. He's a vendor you pushed through. It's a breach of ethics." "You," she said, stepping directly into my personal space, "are a liar." She said the word with such calm finality. It wasn't an accusation. It was a judgment. And then she slapped me. It came from the left. It was not a frantic, emotional strike. It was precise, calculated. The impact was sharp, metallic. It snapped my head to the side, and I tasted the immediate, salty tang of blood on my tongue where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. The shock of it was absolute, a white flash of static in my brain. I turned my head back slowly. I looked directly into her cold, furious eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even raise my hand to my face, though it was stinging, a hot throb spreading across my cheek. I just stood there. I counted my breaths. Inhale, hold for 4, exhale, for 6. The risk assessor's calm. I cataloged the details. The glint of her diamond earring as her hand moved. The exact timbre of her voice when she called me a liar. The faint smell of her Chanel perfume as she violated my space. These were not memories. They were evidence. "Don't ever," she whispered, her face inches from mine. "Challenge me in my own home again." She turned and walked up the stairs, her back perfectly straight. I stayed in the foyer, in the dark, for a full 10 minutes, letting the pain bloom. I did not touch my face. I just let it burn. I didn't sleep. I sat in my room, running scenarios. At 5 a.m., when the sky was a bruised purple, I started to clean. Control is restored through action. I gathered the stray glasses from the party. I started a load of bar towels. Then I went to Celia's bedroom. the master suite. My father was already gone. An early morning board call. The king-sized bed was pristine, untouched. My father's side was rumpled, but Celia's side was perfect. The decorative pillows still in place. She hadn't slept there. A cold hypothesis began to form. I walked down the hall to the main guest suite. The door was ajar. The bed was a wreck. 2 empty glasses on the nightstand. The air was thick with that same peppery cologne. She had slept here. My original task had been to strip the guest linens. Now, it was an investigation. I pulled back the heavy duvet, and there, on the fitted sheet, half hidden under the pillow she had used, was a man's wallet. A dark, expensive-looking bifold, not my father's. My heart didn't race. It became very still. I put on the latex cleaning gloves I was already wearing. Procedure. I picked it up. It was heavy. I opened it. Driver's license. Evan Moore. The smiling, charming face from the proposal photo stared up at me. Behind the license, a stack of cards, a black Amex, a Norcrest vendor badge. And tucked into the cash slot, a white plastic rectangle, a hotel keycard. The Willow Bend Hotel, room 1427. Beside it was a folded receipt, a room service charge from the Willow Bend, dated 2 nights ago, a bottle of champagne, 2 entrees, but the name on the receipt, the name the room was registered under, was not Evan Moore. The name was E. Monroe. I remembered the proposal I'd flagged, the light on metrics, heavy on buzzwords proposal. I hadn't just run his name, I'd run the LLC listed on his invoice, E. Monroe Creative LLC. He didn't just stay at a hotel under a fake name. He was doing business with Norcrest under a fake name, an alias that was just a slight variation of his real one, Sloppy. I pulled out my phone. I took photos. Clear, high resolution, the license, the hotel key, the receipt, with the E. Monroe signature. I placed the wallet back, exactly as I'd found it. I understood. The kiss wasn't a drunken pass. It was a power play, a dismissal. The slap wasn't just anger, it was panic. Cousin was just a cover story, a flimsy curtain, and curtains always have seams. This wasn't just nepotism, this wasn't just harassment, this was coordinated fraud, and Celia, the head of communications, the face of integrity, was sleeping next to the evidence. I walked back to my room, the throb in my cheek a dull, steady metronome. My mind was already building the file. My father, Richard Kent, is a man who believes in surfaces. He sits on the board of Norcrest Dynamics, a position he achieved through decades of steady, predictable competence and an unerring ability to align himself with the prevailing wind. He is a creature of the boardroom, comfortable in the rarefied air of quarterly projections and stockholder meetings. He loves the idea of a perfect family, the kind that looks good in a Christmas card, the kind that reinforces his status as a stable, reliable leader. He doesn't just love Celia, he believes in the image she projects. To him, her meticulously crafted world of effortless elegance and social grace isn't a performance. It's just life. He sees her curated dinners and her flawless professional reputation as an extension of his own success. He does not look beneath the paint. He doesn't want to know about the rot in the foundation. I moved into their glass and steel monstrosity of a house in the Grayford Hills 8 months ago. My mother had passed away the year before, a long, quiet fading from lymphoma that left me with a hollowed-out feeling and an apartment full of things I couldn't bear to touch. The move was logical, practical. The commute from my old place was an hour and 15 minutes. From my father's house, it was 20. I told myself, and him, that it made sense. I told myself that being busy, that throwing myself into the high-stakes, high-pressure environment of Norcrest risk analysis would fill that new, empty space in my life. I thought I could pave over the grief with 60-hour work weeks. What I didn't realize was that I was trading a quiet, private emptiness for a loud, performative one. Celia embraced my moving in as a project, another narrative to manage. The grieving daughter, finding her footing. I once overheard her telling a fellow board member's wife on the phone, We're just so glad we can be here for her. Her being there manifested as control, disguised as kindness. It was most obvious before company events. She would appear at my bedroom door, arms full of garment bags. "Mara, darling," she'd say, not quite meeting my eyes, instead assessing my closet. "That navy suit you wear, it's a bit severe. A woman in your industry, especially in your role, needs to project approachability. Image is everything." She would then produce a silk blouse in a soft beige or a charcoal gray sheath dress. They were always expensive, always tasteful, and always not me. They were costumes designed to make me fit her model family narrative. I would wear them. It was easier. It was just data, a variable to concede in order to maintain operational stability in the household. Evan Moore was introduced under this same banner of curated reality. "This is my cousin, Evan," Celia announced at a Sunday brunch, the one where my father formally met him. "From my mother's side, he's the most brilliant brand strategist on the East Coast. He's practically a brother to me." Evan played the part perfectly. He brought an absurdly expensive bottle of wine for my father and a bouquet of white orchids for Celia. He even had a small, thoughtful gift for me, a leather-bound journal. "For all your important thoughts," he'd said with a smile that felt rehearsed, and he had his camera. Not a phone, but a high-end mirrorless camera with a heavy lens, which he claimed was just a hobby. He was always taking pictures, capturing moments, candid shots of Celia laughing, of my father looking thoughtfully at the skyline from their patio. He was documenting the lie, building the visual evidence for the story Celia was telling. He was creating the legacy. From the moment his name was floated for the Legacy Week project, I started a file. It's procedural. My fingers typed Evan Moore, E. Monroe Creative, LLC. Celia Vance, relationship, cousin. I saved every email. The introductory message from Celia to the procurement team, where she CC'd me, for visibility. The PDF of his proposal, the one I'd already noted, was thin on substance. His CV, which listed a series of impressive-sounding but vague accomplishments. The bid documents. I archived every digital artifact, every data point that connected them. I created a subfolder in my secure drive, the one I use for high-sensitivity internal audits. It was just good practice. Celia was aware of my diligence, but she misinterpreted it as a character flaw, a lack of sophistication. She often called me Little Miss Data. It was her favorite dismissive nickname, usually deployed at dinner parties when I failed to engage in what she called human conversation, office gossip and social maneuvering. "Oh, don't mind Mara," she'd laugh, tapping my arm. "She's happiest with her spreadsheets. She lives in a world of ones and zeros. She doesn't understand nuance." She was wrong. I understand nuance perfectly. I just prefer to quantify it. That slap was nuance. The lie about his identity was nuance. And the wallet under her guest room pillow was nuance. The morning after the party, after I'd found the wallet and photographed its contents, I came downstairs dressed for work. My cheek was a canvas of dull purple and yellow, hidden under a careful layer of concealer. Celia was in the kitchen, sipping espresso, dressed in an impeccable white robe, looking as if she'd just stepped out of a spa. She looked up as I entered, her eyes cold, assessing. She registered the makeup. She saw that I was not crying. I said nothing. I made my coffee. When I moved to the foyer to leave, she followed me. "Mara." I turned, my hand on the doorknob. "Last night," she said, her voice dropping to that low, steel-edged tone. "It was unfortunate. You were emotional. You misunderstood the situation." It was not a question. It was the official record, being dictated. "I am locking this down," she continued. "For the good of this family, for your father's sake, we will not speak of it again. You will be polite to Evan. You will do your job. Am I clear?" "My face," I said, my voice flat, "is a result of your hysteria," she countered, without blinking. "You were overwrought. You tripped in the dark after I went upstairs. You hit the console table, a clumsy, unfortunate accident." She was rewriting the data, in real time. "Now," she said, her voice brightening instantly. "We're going to walk out to the car together. The Hendersons next door are always watching." She put her arm around my shoulder and pulled me into a one-armed hug. It was a gesture of theatrical warmth, a performance for the Ring camera on her own front door and any neighbors peering through their blinds. Her manicured nails dug slightly into my blazer. "Let the neighbors see us getting along," she whispered, her perfectly lipsticked mouth close to my ear, her breath smelling of coffee. I did not resist. I was a prop in her scene. I let her walk me to my car, smiling. That night, my father found me in my office, the small, sterile room I'd set up adjacent to my bedroom. He hated conflict. He avoided it the way most people avoid physical pain. He had, of course, been given Celia's version of events. "Mara," he started, lingering in the doorway, already uncomfortable. "Celia tells me there was some unpleasantness last night." I turned in my chair. I waited. "She said you had a bit too much to drink, maybe? And you fell. Gave yourself a nasty bruise." I just looked at him. I didn't confirm or deny. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. "And," he sighed, running a hand through his silver hair, "she mentioned you seem to have some friction with this Evan Moore fellow, professionally." "He's her cousin," I stated. Yes. Look, Mara, I know you take your job very seriously. Your diligence it's commendable. But Legacy Week is Celia's flagship project. It's vital for our Q4 optics. Whatever personal feelings you have, whatever minor issues, now is not the time." "It's a conflict of interest, Dad." He winced, as if the words themselves had struck him. "That's a very strong term, Mara. Conflict of interest implies intent. He's family. Celia is just trying to bring in the best talent." "And the incident? In the kitchen?" He waved a dismissive hand. "A misunderstanding. A party. These things happen. Evan is a creative type. European sensibilities. You know," he was quoting Celia. "The important thing," he said, finally getting to his point, "is that we present a united front, as a family, and as executives. I need you to not escalate this. Don't put personal matters above the company's interests." He was asking me to swallow the lie. He was asking me to protect the surface. I looked at my father, a man I once admired, now just a component of a compromised system. I nodded, just once. "I understand." He visibly relaxed. "Good. That's my girl. We'll have this all behind us soon." He patted the doorframe and left. I turned back to my monitor. Don't put personal matters above the company's interests. He was right. The company's interests were, in fact, paramount, and its interests were being threatened by fraud, ethical breaches, and nepotism. I opened my secure drive. I clicked New Folder. I typed the name, Legacy Public. I moved the photos from my phone, the hotel key, the receipt for E, Monroe. I moved the email chain, the vendor proposal, the CV. I created a new text document and began to log, with timestamps, every event, the introduction, the party, the kiss, the slap, the threat, my father's dismissal. Celia thought she was creating a legacy of family values and corporate integrity. She was, just not the one she intended. One day, I thought, as I saved the file and encrypted the drive, their real legacy will be presented, not at a brunch or in a curated Instagram post. It will be presented under the cold, white fluorescent lights of a boardroom. In public, the wallet was dark brown calfskin, expensive. I was still wearing the latex cleaning gloves. Procedure. My hands were steady as I opened it on the guest room nightstand. First, the key, a white plastic rectangle, the Willow Bend Hotel, room 1427. A name was written on the paper sleeve in sharp black ink, E. Monroe. Second, the receipts, not just one, a cluster. The one on top was from the Willow Bend's bar, the Cypress Lounge. It was dated from last night. The timestamp at the bottom read 23:05. The total was significant, the signature on the merchant copy. scrawled hastily, was E. Monroe. The signature was a jolt. I didn't need to guess. I knew it. It was the same arrogant, looping E and sharp, angular M from the vendor proposal Celia had pushed through my department. The proposal from Evan Moore. My phone came out. I am methodical. I am a risk analyst. This is what I do. I didn't just take one picture. I documented the evidence. I laid the keycard flat. Click. I laid the bar receipt flat. Click. I zoomed in on the timestamp. 23:05. Click. I zoomed in on the signature. E. Monroe. Click. And then I saw it. On the grainy, flimsy paper of the receipt, near the signature, was a faint, waxy impression. A trace. It was the precise shade of nude rose that Celia wore. The one she called executive. It was a lipstick blot. A ghost of a kiss pressed against the paper. Perhaps as she'd handed the check back to him. Click. I photographed his driver's license, Evan Moore, next to the E. Monroe signature on the receipt. The visual discrepancy was stark. I photographed the contents, put everything back exactly as I found it, and placed the wallet back under the pillow. I stripped the bed, the smell of his cologne and her perfume clinging to the sheets. I put them in the laundry. Just another task. But the evidence was already uploading from my personal phone to my encrypted cloud drive. The file Legacy Public was growing. I didn't go to the office. I went back to my own room, to my own terminal. It was 6:00 a.m. The adrenaline was a cold, clean fuel. I logged into the Norcrest vendor portal. This was my territory. I pulled the file for E. Monroe Creative LLC, as I'd remembered. Celia had been the executive sponsor. The address listed was a P.N.O. box at a UPS store downtown. I pulled the invoice history, payments for brand strategy, narrative consulting, all approved. Then I ran a search for Evan Moore as an individual consultant. He had a separate file, a W-9 submitted for speaker fees related to the upcoming Legacy Week. I ran the employer identification number, EIN, for E. Monroe Creative LLC against the state's database. Then I cross-referenced the Social Security number provided on Evan Moore's W-9. It was a perfect match. The EIN for the LLC was his personal Social Security number, just formatted as a business ID. He hadn't even bothered to create a separate legal entity. It was the laziest fraud I had ever seen. He was E. Monroe. He was Evan Moore. He was billing Norcrest Dynamics from two different streams, under two different names, one as a company, one as an individual, for the same project. And the address? The UPS P.O. box for E. Monroe Creative LLC was the exact same P.O. box listed as the home address for Evan Moore. It was contemptuous. He assumed no one would ever look. He assumed Celia's power was enough to render him invisible. I went back to the primary vendor packet. Procurement requires an emergency contact for all new accounts. I opened the PDF Celia had signed off on. Registered agent, Evan Moore. Primary contact, Evan Moore. Emergency contact, in case of vendor incapacity or default. C. Vance, her name, her Norcrest direct line. Her signature was at the bottom of the approval page. She hadn't just recommended her cousin. She had signed on as the emergency contact for his fake company. The fraud was complete. The motive was the relationship. Now I just needed to link the final piece. The bar receipt was from 23:05 last night. The wallet was in the guest room. I thought about the party. I thought about his camera. 2 days ago, Evan had emailed a link to Celia, my father, and the Legacy Week planning team. The subject, a few beautiful moments from the party. I had been CC'd. I never opened it. I opened it now. It was a gallery of professionally shot, overly dramatic black and white photos. My father looking thoughtful by the fireplace, executives laughing with staged, open-mouthed joy, and dozens of Celia. Celia holding a wine glass. Celia laughing at something off-camera. One photo, in particular, was titled, Candid. She was in the center of the living room, looking away, a perfect, knowing smile on her face. Behind her, dominating the wall, was a large beveled glass mirror. I downloaded the original, high-resolution file. I opened it in an analysis program. I bypassed the subject, Celia, and went straight to the reflection. I zoomed. I sharpened the image. There he was, Evan. He wasn't across the room. Snapping a candid, he was standing directly in front of her. He was holding the camera up with one hand, taking the picture of her, of himself in the mirror. And his other hand was reflected clearly. It was not at his side. It was on her body. His hand was splayed possessively across her waist, his thumb hooked into the silk of her dress. Her own hand was resting on his forearm. It wasn't a party photo. It was an admission. I right-clicked. I pulled the metadata, the EXIF data. Every digital photo tells its own story. Camera, Sony a7 R4. Timestamp, date created, the night of the party. Time created, 23/18/04. My blood went cold. The bar receipt from the Willow Bend Hotel. Signed E. Monroe, 23:05. The intimate photo with Celia at the party, taken by Evan, 23:18. The Willow Bend Hotel is, at minimum, a 15-minute drive from my father's house in the hills. He could not be in both places. Unless... I looked at the bar receipt again. The date, the time. I looked at the photo. The date, the time. They weren't both from last night. The party, the kiss, the slap, the photo, had been Saturday. It was now Monday morning. The bar receipt in his wallet was from last night, Sunday. He had been at the party Saturday. He had stayed in the guest room. He had, in his arrogance or haste, forgotten his wallet, which meant he had spent all of Sunday without his wallet, which meant Celia had paid. He had been at the Willow Bend last night, in room 1427, registered as E. Monroe, and Celia had been there with him. She had paid for the bar tab, and she had, perhaps, left that faint, waxy trace of a kiss on the receipt before he tucked it back into the wallet she was carrying. The fraud, the harassment, the affair, the chain was complete. It was 7:15 a.m. I was in my car, parked in my designated spot in the subterranean Norcrest garage. The air was cold, smelling of concrete and exhaust. I took out my personal phone. I opened a new text message. To Evan Moore. My thumbs were perfectly steady. I have your wallet. Want it back? I hit send. The indicator showed delivered. I watched. A moment later, it switched. Read 7:16 a.m. He was in the building, or he was with her. I waited. No reply. He was a coward. He was panicking. He wasn't thinking about the wallet. He was thinking about what was in it. He was calling Celia. I counted the seconds. I analyzed the likely response patterns. He would panic. She would strategize. She would try to control the narrative, minimize the threat, establish dominance. It would take her approximately 10 minutes to absorb his panic, formulate a plan, and execute. My corporate phone, sitting in the console, buzzed. 7:26 a.m., 10 minutes, predictable. A new message, not from Evan, from Celia Vance. Her tone was unmistakable. Mara, do not make a scene. This is beneath you. We will discuss this when you get to the office, like adults. She didn't ask, what wallet? She didn't ask, what are you talking about? She didn't deny. She confirmed. I looked at the message, like adults. The way she was an adult when she left her handprint on my face. The way my father was an adult when he told me to protect the company. I typed my reply. The office has meeting rooms. I hit send. I stepped out of the car. My heels clicked on the concrete, like adults. I got to my desk on the 41st floor, the risk analysis floor. I opened my calendar. I opened the legacy public file. I added a new note, a tactical addendum. At Norcrest Dynamics, all critical, high-stakes conversations happen in one location, not the gleaming executive boardrooms on the 50th floor. They're too public. The real conversations, the ones involving legal, compliance, or crisis, happened in conference room 17B. It's an old, ugly room on the legal floor, with a drab carpet and a buzzing fluorescent light. It's a relic, but it's the only conference room in the entire skyscraper, due to an archaic SEC audit requirement that is equipped with two high-definition, wide-angle cameras. One is aimed at the door, the other is aimed at the table. They record audio, and the footage is automatically retained on a secure server for 180 days. Celia wanted to talk at the office. I booked 17B. Legacy Week was not a project. It was an invasion. Celia, in her role as head of communications, had managed to turn the entire Norcrest Dynamics headquarters into a shrine to a fabricated history. Vinyl banners dripped from the atrium ceiling, displaying black and white photos of the founders, men my father knew, but whom Celia had never met, overlaid with words like heritage, trust, and family. Our corporate intranet was flooded with legacy profiles. Our email signatures were automatically appended with the new Norcrest, a Legacy of Values tagline. It was a masterpiece of narrative control, a multi-million-dollar campaign designed to rebrand our aggressive market strategies as wholesome tradition. And Celia was its architect. She was everywhere, radiant, accepting congratulations for a project that was, at its core, a magnificent lie. My involvement was, as always, procedural. Celia assigned me my role via an email chain that included 2 VPs and my father. Mara, she'd written, as our lead risk analyst, you are perfectly positioned to oversee the compliance protocols for Legacy Week. We need your sharp eyes on all supplier contracts and public-facing statements to ensure they align with our standards. She was handing me the rulebook. She was asking me, Little Miss Data, to validate the paperwork. She saw it as a bureaucratic task, a way to keep me busy, to ensure my severity was productively channeled. She couldn't have known that I don't just check protocols, I stress test them. I replied all, Thank you, Celia. I agree that proactive compliance is key to this celebration. A strong system isn't just about what we say, but what we do when tested. I'll draft a proposal for an interactive component that will solidify this message. My proposal landed on her desk 2 hours later. It was titled, Lessons in Integrity, a live-streamed town hall. The plan was simple. I proposed we add a new flagship event to Legacy Week, a 1-hour moderated panel discussion. It would be broadcast live, mandatory viewing for all 5,000 Norcrest employees nationwide, and would feature an open, anonymous Q&A session submitted via our internal messaging app. I framed it in her language. I called it a bold demonstration of transparency and an opportunity to engage with the workforce in real time. I wrote that in an era of corporate skepticism, Norcrest can lead by not just stating our values, but by interrogating them publicly. Celia was ecstatic. She called me, a rare event. Mara, this is brilliant, she gushed, her voice vibrating with PR enthusiasm. Absolutely brilliant. It's proactive. It's modern. It shows we aren't afraid of the hard questions. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking my team loves. She didn't see the trap. She only saw the stage. She saw herself, center stage, fielding softball questions about corporate philanthropy and work-life balance. She was so blinded by the potential positive press that she missed the core mechanism. Live-streamed meant it was public. Mandatory meant everyone would see it. Anonymous Q&A meant I no longer controlled the questions. The crowd did, and most importantly, broadcast meant everyone was consenting to be recorded. I'll have my team start the technical arrangements immediately, she said. You will moderate. Of course, your risk title gives it the perfect weight. Of course, I said. And I'll need to secure the speakers. To make it authentic, we should have voices from different levels, perhaps someone from legal, someone from HR, and what about our new brand consultant, Evan Moore? He could speak on authenticity in the corporate narrative. There was a fractional pause. Evan? Yes, she said. recovering instantly. What a wonderful idea. It connects the legacy message directly to our new brand voice. Excellent synergy. Mara, handle it. She hung up. The plan was now in motion. My next step was to weaponize the bureaucracy she so adored. I drafted the formal invitation to Evan Moore, CCing Celia and the entire Legacy Week committee. Mr. Moore, I wrote, we formally request your participation as a keynote speaker. Your insights on brand authenticity will be invaluable. I attached the standard Norcrest speaker agreement, and I added one page. It was a new document I had drafted myself, modeled on SEC disclosure requirements, but tailored for our internal policy. I titled it Addendum 4.1, Conflict of Interest and Familial Relationship Declaration. It looked dense, boring, and utterly mandatory. It required the signatory to list any and all personal, romantic, or familial relationships, defined as blood, marriage, or cohabitation, with any executive, board member, or employee of Norcrest Dynamics. A small print clause at the bottom noted that failure to disclose or provision of false information on this binding document may result of immediate contract termination and potential legal review. I sent it now. He had two options. He could sign it and lie, committing prosecutable fraud by claiming Celia was just his cousin, or he could refuse to sign, a massive red flag that would halt his participation and expose him to my procedural follow-up. Either way, his signature, or lack thereof, was a data point. With the public-facing trap set, I prepared the private one. My text message to Celia had booked conference room 17B for 3:00 p.m. that afternoon. To discuss speaker protocols, my calendar invite read. I went to 17B at 2:45 p.m., carrying my laptop and my winter coat. Even though it was mild outside, I told the floor admin I needed to test the AV. The room was exactly as I remembered. Ugly, windowless, and cold. I plugged my laptop into the display, confirming the system worked. As I did, I checked the cameras. Camera 1, mounted high in the corner, captured the doorway and the coat rack. Camera 2, above the monitor, captured the entire length of the polished table. There were no blind spots. Anyone sitting at that table was visible from two angles. The audio pickup was a sensitive array in the ceiling. This was sufficient, but I am an analyst. I require redundancy. From the pocket of my coat, I took a digital audio recorder. It was the size of a USB stick. High fidelity, voice activated. I pressed record, and its tiny blue light blinked twice, then went dark. I hung my coat on the rack by the door. The recorder nestled deep in the woolen pocket, its microphone aimed perfectly at the table. My air cover, as we call it in Risk, was the final step. I could not move against Celia without neutralizing the corporate immune system. I needed internal audit to be my witness, not my obstacle. I sent a secured, encrypted email to Alan Thorpe, the VP of Internal Audit. Alan is a man with no imagination and a religious devotion to bylaws. Alan, I wrote, as part of my compliance review for Legacy Week, I will be running a simulated ethics scenario during the Lessons in Integrity live stream. The objective is to measure leadership reaction and protocol adherence in response to an unexpected ethical disclosure in a public, high-stakes forum. I am flagging this for you as an FYI, as the simulation may appear live to all participants. No intervention is required. This is purely a stress test of our internal controls. I attached my Lessons in Integrity proposal. I did not mention Celia. I did not mention Evan. I used their own sterile language against them. Alan replied in 15 minutes. Noted, Mara, a prudent test. Proceed. No one asked any questions. Alan wouldn't. He saw simulation and stress test and was satisfied. In the corporate world, people are conditioned to believe in the celebration, not the catastrophe. They see the banner, they hear the music, and they assume everything is fine. They never, ever want to look at the hard questions until it's too late. The trap was now fully constructed. The panel was the public stage. Room 17B was the private confessional, and I had notified the auditors that a test was coming. My final act before going to 17B was to prepare the payload. I went to the Central Executive Office and requested access to the departmental safe, a privilege of my seniority and risk. I had a single 9x12 manila envelope. It was sealed with heavy red wax. Inside that envelope was the complete, unassailable truth. A forensic printout of the E. Monroe Creative LLC filing, showing its EIN matched Evan Moore's SSN. A copy of the Willow Bend Hotel keycard, room 1427, a high-resolution, color photograph of the bar receipt, signed E. Monroe, with the lipstick stain clearly visible. A printout of Evan Moore's speaker proposal signature, placed side by side with the receipt signature, a perfect match. A high-resolution printout of the mirror photograph, with a red circle highlighting Evan's hand on Celia's waist. A notarized copy of the photo's metadata, showing the timestamp, 23/18/04. A printout of the bar receipt's metadata, showing the timestamp, 23/05. A printout of the vendor file showing C. Vance as the emergency contact for E. Monroe Creative LLC. I had condensed the entire fraud, the affair, the conflict of interest, the embezzlement, into 8 pieces of paper. I wrote 3 words on the front of the envelope in black marker: open in case of crisis. I logged it with the CFO's assistant. Legacy Week contingency materials, I said. She nodded, stamped it, and locked it away. It was my insurance policy. It was the bullet in the chamber. It was 2:58 p.m. I walked to conference room 17B. The cameras were rolling. My audio recorder was active. I was ready for my meeting. The buzzing fluorescent light in conference room 17B cast a sick, greenish-white pallor on the polished mahogany table. The room was kept at a steady, uncomfortable 65 degrees, a temperature designed to keep meetings short and tempers cool. I was already seated at the far end when they arrived. My laptop open, a single slim document folder beside it. Celia entered first, all posture and performance. She wore a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit, an armor of professional confidence. Her smile was bright, practiced, and utterly false. It was the smile she used on difficult journalists and underperforming subordinates. Evan Moore trailed behind her. He had tried for casual, but it sat on him like a borrowed suit. His expensive blazer was rumpled, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was already contaminated by panic. "Mara," Celia began, taking the seat directly opposite me. Evan sat beside her, a nervous shadow. "Thank you for being so efficient. Now, let's clear this up quickly. I think there's been a silly misunderstanding." She leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table, a portrait of reasonable authority. The overhead camera, camera 2, had a perfect top-down view of her face. "I know you're just doing your job, but you need to understand, Evan is family. He's my cousin. This zealousness, while admirable in a different context, is simply not necessary here. We don't need to push this any further." She smiled again, an offer of amnesty. "Drop it, and we'll pretend you weren't hysterical." I did not smile back. I did not engage with her narrative. I pushed my laptop to the side. I opened the slim folder. I slid one item across the polished table. It was the dark brown calfskin wallet. It landed between them with a soft, definitive thud. Evan flinched, a visceral reaction. Celia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes, her very cold eyes, narrowed. She looked at the wallet, then at me. "That was in the guest room," I said. My voice was flat, an auditory blank slate in the over-mic'd room. "Under the pillow. It must have fallen." Celia didn't move. Evan stared at it as if it were a snake. "I've already taken the liberty of logging its contents," I continued. I slid the first document from my folder. It was a high-resolution, time-stamped photograph. "This is the key card for room 1427 at the Willow Bend Hotel," I said, tapping the photo. "Registered to an E. Monroe. And this," I slid a second photo over, "is the bar receipt from last night, Also signed by E. Monroe. Celia finally spoke, her voice losing its warm, honeyed tone, dropping into a colder register. He was working. It's a business expense. I fail to see the relevance. The relevance, I said, is that cousins don't typically use aliases to check into hotels, and they don't usually sign bar tabs with a name that isn't theirs, unless, of course, that alias is also the name of a shell company. Evan, finally finding his voice, sat up straight, attempting to regain control. It was a poor performance. "It's a professional name," he blustered, his voice an octave too high. "An artiste name, E. Monroe. It's for my creative work. It's perfectly normal in the branding industry. You wouldn't understand." "A stage name," I repeated, nodding, as if considering it. "That's an interesting hypothesis." I slid the third document across the table. It was the side-by-side comparison, the EAN filing for E. Monroe Creative LLC and the W-9 for Evan Moore. The matching identification numbers were circled in red. "Is it also perfectly normal for your stage name LLC to share an employer identification number with your personal social security number?" I asked, my voice cutting through his bluster. "Is it standard in the creative industry to bill a single client 6 figures from 2 different entities, one real and one fake, for the exact same project? Because in my industry, we don't call that creative, we call it wire fraud." The words hung in the cold air. Wire fraud. Evan went pale. He looked at Celia, his panic now undisguised. Celia's mask did not crack. It hardened. The PR smile was gone, replaced by the cold, hard fury I recognized from the night of the party. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper, intimate and threatening. "You," she hissed, "are betraying this family. You are betraying your father." This was her final weapon, the appeal to blood, the accusation of treachery. She was trying to drag me back into the emotional, illogical world of the home, where she held the power. I did not lean in. I sat back, letting the cameras capture our relative postures. Her, aggressive and leaning forward. Me, calm and upright. "I am protecting this company," I said, my voice clear and steady for the ceiling microphones. "I am fulfilling my duty as a risk analyst to report potential vendor fraud and an undisclosed executive conflict of interest." I paused, then met her gaze. "And as for the family you're talking about, which one is that? The one you perform for the cameras on the front porch? Or the one you lie to about your cousin?" That was the trigger. The word lie, combined with fraud, broke Evan's composure. He was not a boardroom fighter. He was a con artist, and his con had been named. His eyes darted to the evidence on the table. He saw the wallet. He saw the photos. In his panicked mind, if he could just get the evidence, he could erase the problem. He lunged. It was not a smooth motion. It was a desperate, clumsy scramble across the table. "You have no right to that," he yelled, his hand snatching at the wallet and the photos. I didn't move to stop him. I didn't flinch. I simply pulled my hands back and watched. Camera 2, the overhead, captured his arm sweeping across the table. Camera 1, by the door, captured his body half out of his chair, his face contorted in aggression, my coat, hanging on the rack, recorded the sound of his ragged breathing and the scrape of the wallet against the wood. He grabbed the wallet, shoved it into his jacket pocket. He crumpled the photos of the receipt and the EIN match in his fist. He was panting, looking at Celia, expecting her to fix this. Celia was staring at me, her face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. They were both looking at me. They were not looking at my hands. My hands were on my laptop. My finger was on the send button. The email was already written to Alan Thorpe, VP, Internal Audit, CC, Richard Kent, the entire Norcrest Dynamics Board of Directors, Legal Department. Subject: Urgent. Notification of vendor fraud, embezzlement, and executive conflict of interest. Legacy Week Project. Attachment: Legacy Public Dossier Secure. Zip. The attached file contained everything: the EIN match, the hotel receipts, the signature comparisons, the high-resolution mirror photo, with its metadata, the audio file of Celia telling me I tripped, everything. I pressed the button. A soft whoosh left my laptop. In the silent, cold room, it sounded as loud as a gunshot. A second later, Celia's phone, sitting on the table beside her, buzzed violently. Then Evan's. Then, through the wall, I could hear the faint buzz of phones in the adjacent legal offices. The alert was spreading. Celia looked down at her screen. Her thumb moved, unlocking it. I watched the blood drain from her face. The high-performance mask of Celia Vance didn't just crack. It disintegrated. For 1 second, she looked exactly what she was: terrified, caught. She looked up at me, her eyes hollow. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a statement of fact. She was right. She thought I had just blown up the family. She thought I had just ruined my father. She didn't understand my job. She didn't understand the system. I closed my laptop. The click of the lid shutting was final. "I do," I said. I stood up. "I've just let you both give a full video-recorded confession. Evan, by demonstrating aggression to seize evidence, and you, Celia, by confirming the cover-up." I looked at Evan, who was still clutching the crumpled photos. "You can keep the wallet. I have copies." I looked at Celia. "I'm sure internal audit will be here shortly. You should wait for them." I walked toward the door, leaving them frozen at the table. I left my coat on the rack. The little blue light on the recorder was off, but the microphone was faithfully capturing the frantic, whispered, "What did she do? What did she send?" That started the moment my hand touched the doorknob. I stepped out of 17B and closed the door, sealing them inside with the 2 cameras and the truth. The main auditorium at Norcrest Dynamics was a cathedral of brushed steel and gray acoustic paneling. It was designed to hold 500 executives, and today it was standing room only. The lights were not the warm, theatrical spots of a celebration. They were the flat, sterile white of a surgical theater. On the 30-foot LED screen dominating the stage, the Norcrest, a Legacy of Values logo, rotated on a slow, hypnotic loop. The air was thick with the hum of broadcast equipment and the anxious energy of an entire company holding its breath. This was my Lessons in Integrity panel, the flagship event of Legacy Week. This was the stage I had set. Celia Vance walked to the center lectern to a wave of applause. She was, as always, a vision of absolute control. It had been less than an hour since she'd been staring at my urgent email in the cold confines of 17B. An hour to absorb the fact that her career was over. An hour to pull herself together for the performance of her life. And it was a performance. Her face was a masterpiece of cosmetic engineering, powdered and flawless. Her smile was bright, brittle, and welded in place. She gripped the sides of the lectern, her knuckles white beneath her rings. She was an animal in a trap, but an animal that knew only how to perform. "Thank you," she began, her voice resonating with that familiar, warm confidence. It was only slightly strained. "Thank you all. Welcome to this vital session. Lessons in Integrity." She took a breath, her eyes sweeping the room, refusing to land on me in the front row. "When we conceived Legacy Week," she continued, "we didn't just want to talk about our values. We wanted to live them. We wanted to celebrate the incredible, resilient family that is Norcrest. We believe in trust. We believe in building relationships. We believe in transparency. And we believe that our greatest asset is our people and the legacy we build together." It was a beautiful speech, polished, passionate, and utterly meaningless. She was reading her own eulogy and calling it an introduction. "And to lead this crucial discussion," she said, her eyes finally finding me, "is a woman whose dedication to process and standards is truly unmatched. Our own head of risk analysis for the Eastern Seaboard, Mara Kent." She applauded, It was a dare. I walked up the steps, my heels clicking on the stage. I was not wearing the soft, approachable beige she had once picked for me. I was in a dark navy blue suit with sharp, structured shoulders. It was my armor. I didn't take the lectern. I stood at the moderator's podium, a smaller, more tactical position, holding a small digital remote. A headset microphone was already clipped to my lapel. "Thank you, Celia," I said into the mic. My voice, amplified, filled the auditorium. It was cold, clear, and perfectly neutral. "You're right. Process is vital. Transparency is the core of what we do. And today, I'm not here to talk about abstract theories. I'm here to present a control scenario, a case study." I looked out at the audience. In the third row, I saw Alan Thorpe, the VP of Internal Audit, sitting with two of his senior people. He nodded at me, pen and pad ready. He was expecting his simulated ethics scenario. "In risk analysis," I began, my voice steady, "we don't just write rules. We stress test them. We build models to find the breaking point. We ask, what happens when the system fails? What happens when personal relationships are prioritized over corporate policy?" Behind me, the massive LED screen, which had been showing Celia's face, now switched to my feed. The Norcrest, a legacy of values logo, faded, replaced by a stark black and white title slide. Case study, Vendor Onboarding and Conflict Protocol, A4.1. "Let's take a hypothetical," I said, pacing slightly. "A high-visibility, multi-million-dollar corporate project. A new vendor is brought in. An executive sponsors this vendor, fast-tracking their contract, assuring procurement that they are the best talent for a project built on authenticity." I saw heads nodding. They all knew the project. Legacy Week. "But what if," I continued, "the vendor is not just talent? What if they are in a close, personal relationship with the executive sponsor? A relationship that is not disclosed to the board, to procurement, or to the compliance department?" I clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. It was a simple flowchart. At the top, a box labeled Norcrest Dynamics. An arrow pointed down. "Here is the payment chain," I said. "Norcrest Dynamics pays E. Monroe Creative LLC for brand strategy and consulting fees. Standard procedure." A low murmur began. The name Monroe was not unknown. It was on the Legacy Week internal site. "But what if we run a simple check? A check that is part of our standard risk protocol?" I clicked the remote again. A new box appeared next to the first one. Vendor, Evan Moore, and a second box. Vendor, E. Monroe Creative LLC. A thick red line connected them. Data point, ein match. E. Monroe Creative LLC is a shell company. Its employer identification number is identical to the Social Security number of the individual consultant, Mr. Evan Moore. The murmuring in the auditorium spiked. This was not a simulation. This was real. "The system has been compromised," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "One individual is billing the company from two different entities, under two different names, for the exact same project, a project, I should add, sponsored by the executive with whom he has the undisclosed relationship." I clicked again. The most damning slide appeared. It was a timeline. "Let's look at the expense chain. This is where fraud and personal relationships often merge." The timeline was simple. Left side, invoice, E. Monroe LLC, $50,000. Strategic consulting, approved. Right side, expense report, Willow Bend Hotel, room 1427, Reg, name, E. Monroe, 4800, client hosting, approved by C. Vance. I let the slide sit there for a full 5 seconds. The silence in the room was absolute. "Here is another invoice. 2 weeks later, click, invoice, E. Monroe LLC, $75,000. Narrative development, approved. Expense report, Willow Bend Hotel, room 1427. Reg, name, E. Monroe, $3,200. Vendor development. Approved by C. Vance. The dates on the invoices perfectly match the dates of the hotel stays. This is not just a conflict of interest, I stated, my voice echoing in the silence. This is embezzlement. This is the diversion of corporate funds to pay for a personal relationship, disguised as a business expense. I turned my head and looked directly at Celia. She was sitting in the front row, rigid. She was no longer a person. She was a porcelain doll, flawless and empty, her eyes fixed on the screen that was displaying her signature on the forged expense reports. When professional and personal roles overlap, I said, turning back to the audience, we require a simple, non-negotiable process. It is called disclosure. It is the foundation of transparency. It is the core of integrity. Without it, the entire system fails. I clicked the remote. We will now open the floor to the live anonymous Q&A. The massive screen split in two. On the left, the damning timeline. On the right, a blank feed titled Live Questions. A prompt invited all 5,000 employees, in the room and online, to submit. For a moment, nothing. Then, the first question appeared. Question 1. This is clearly fraud. Has legal been notified? I nodded. Yes, the legal department and internal audit received a full evidentiary report, including all relevant documents, at 2:59 p.m. today, prior to this presentation. In the third row, Alan Thorpe looked up from his notepad, his face pale. He understood. This was not a simulation. This was a live disclosure. A new question hit the board immediately. Question 2. What happens if the executive who approved this is senior leadership? Are they protected? This was the question everyone was thinking. This was the test. I looked at the broadcast camera, the one with the glowing red light. I was speaking to everyone. The process has no exceptions, I said, my voice leaving no room for interpretation. Integrity is not situational. It is not dependent on your pay grade or your title. The protocols exist to protect the company from its leadership, if necessary. The broadcast director, a true professional, understood the moment. The main camera panned from my face and began a slow, agonizing zoom onto the front row, onto Celia. She was trapped in the high-definition glare. 500 people in the room, 5,000 online, watching her. She was frozen, a statue of buried panic. She did not move. She did not breathe. The camera held on her for 3, 4, 5 seconds, a lifetime of public exposure. Then it panned back to me, and the third question appeared. It came from the Whisper Network, from the human conversation Celia thought she controlled. It was not a question, it was a statement. Question 3. That consultant Evan Moore, he isn't her cousin. Everyone in communications knows that. The air was sucked from the room. The lie had been named, the quiet. Unverifiable office gossip had just been broadcast on a 30-foot screen in the middle of a compliance meeting. Celia made a sound, a tiny strangled gasp that the stage microphones almost caught. All eyes were on me, the analyst, the little Miss Data. What would I do with this new variable? I didn't look at Celia. I didn't look at the audience. I looked directly into the red light of camera 3. I spoke to every employee, every manager, every person who had ever been told to stay quiet. Thank you for that clarification, I said. It seems our case study is no longer hypothetical. I let the silence stretch, a heavy, suffocating weight. In risk analysis, I concluded, my voice dropping slightly, we have a core principle. You can hide the transaction, you can obscure the relationship, you can leverage your power to build a new narrative. My eyes found Celia's in the front row. She was staring at me, her face finally, beautifully, broken. But you cannot erase the data. The truth always leaves a receipt. The silence that followed my final statement was absolute. It was a vacuum, heavier and more complete than any sound. The red light on the broadcast camera was still glowing. I had just, in front of 5,000 employees, executed the head of communications. On the massive screen, The anonymous question board was frozen. Question 3. That consultant, Evan Moore. He isn't her cousin. Everyone in communications knows that. From the third row, a man stood up. Alan Thorpe, the VP of Internal Audit. His face was chalk white. He was a man of pure process, a man who lived by the bylaws, and I had just turned his world inside out. He had come expecting to watch a simulation of a compliance test. He had, instead, become a witness. He looked at me on the stage. He looked at the 2 senior board members in the front row, who were staring, horrified, at Celia. "Ms. Kent," Alan said. His voice, unmiked, was sharp in the stunned room. Is it your testimony that the evidentiary report you submitted is related to the hypothetical, the case study, you just presented? He was giving me one last chance, a chance to call it a drill, a chance to back down, to say it was all just a test. I met his gaze from the stage. "Mr. Thorpe," I said, my voice projecting into the auditorium, "I am stating that the Lessons in Integrity demonstration is now complete. You have your test results. You may now proceed with the standard crisis protocol, as per the bylaws." I had used his language. Demonstration. Test results. Protocol. He understood. I was not backing down. I was handing him the torch. Live. On camera. He turned to his assistant, who was already on her phone. "Activate 9 Delta. Authorize it. Open the crisis envelope, the one logged by Kent. 1458. He turned back to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, walking quickly to the lectern, We are experiencing significant technical difficulties with the broadcast feed. This program is now concluded." The giant LED screen behind me flickered and went black. The feed was cut. The lights in the auditorium snapped on. Returning the room from a theater to a simple corporate space, the spell was broken. A new voice, the neutral, amplified voice of building security, came over the speakers. "Thank you for your attendance. Please remain in your seats for a brief administrative pause." The technical difficulty was the truth. The technical fact was that the system had been exposed to light, and it was now burning. I watched as 2 uniformed, plainclothes security officers, the polite, firm kind we keep for terminated executives, walked down the center aisle. They did not look at me. They walked directly to the front row. They stopped next to Celia. One of them, a tall man, leaned down, his voice a low murmur, but his posture public. "Ms. Vance, the Board of Directors requests your presence in the 50th floor conference room, immediately." She stood up. It was a slow, mechanical movement, as if her strings had been cut and then clumsily reattached. Her face was a blank, porcelain mask. She didn't look at her colleagues. She didn't look at my father, who was sitting 2 seats away, rigid. She began to walk up the aisle, flanked by the 2 officers. As she passed the row where I had been sitting, her head turned. Her eyes found mine. The fury from 17B was gone. The radiant PR confidence was gone. There was nothing left. Just a cold, vacant recognition. The look of a failed state. The officers then paused by Evan Moore, who had been trying to shrink into his seat. "Mr. Moore, you'll be coming with us." "I'm not an employee," Evan blustered, his voice cracking, loud in the nervous silence. "You can't detain me. We are requesting you remain on site to assist with an internal investigation," the officer said, his voice flat, unyielding. "Your vendor contract includes a cooperation clause for audits, preservation of evidence." Evan's face crumpled. He knew. He stood, and the 3 of them, Celia, Evan, and the guard, were marched out of the main doors, a public, silent escort. I was not invited, not at first. I waited. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was from the general counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diaz. Room 5001. Now. The 50th floor boardroom was a long, dark room, all glass and polished stone, overlooking the entire Grayford skyline. When I entered, the mood was funereal. Diaz was at the head of the table, Alan Thorpe was there, and 3 senior board members, including my father, Richard Kent. Celia and Evan were not in the room. They were in the adjacent glass-walled office, the one they use for witnesses during depositions, sitting on hard chairs, pointedly not looking at each other. In the center of the dark mahogany table, my manila envelope sat, its red wax seal broken, sliced open with a letter opener. The contents were fanned out like a losing poker hand. Diaz gestured for me to sit. I took the chair at the far end, opposite her. "Ms. Kent," she said, her voice dry. "This is your packet." "Yes." "It contains a significant volume of allegations." "It contains a significant volume of verifiable data," I corrected. She picked up the first printout, the high-resolution image of the mirror photo. "This is a photo of Ms. Vance and Mr. Moore." "Correct," I said. "Taken by Mr. Moore, with his hand on her waist, at 23:18 on Saturday. The notarized metadata file is attached." She nodded, already moving on. She picked up the next print, the photo of the bar receipt, signed E. Monroe, the faint lipstick stain visible under the harsh office lights. "And this?" "A bar tab from the Willow Bend Hotel. Room 1427. The charge was from Sunday night. The wallet was left in the guest room Saturday. This proves the relationship was ongoing, and that he was billing the hotel stays, approved by Ms. Vance under her executive code, to the company. Registered under his fraudulent alias." Diaz looked at Alan Thorpe, who just nodded. "The fraud, the embezzlement, the chain of custody is clean." Then Diaz picked up the last item, the small, silver USB drive. "This was also in the envelope. It's an audio file, labeled Celia Vance, Harassment Threat, SAT. "Correct. We played it," Diaz said. "The audio is clear." She pressed a button on the conference room speakerphone. The room filled with sound, not the calculated whisper of 17B. This was raw. It was the audio my phone had captured in the dark foyer of my father's house. Celia's voice, cold and hissing. "You are a liar. You will not breathe a word of this. Not to your father, not to HR. You will not ruin the family reputation over one clumsy, drunken pass." Then, my voice, flat and cold. "He cornered me. It was harassment." Celia's voice, full of contempt. "He kissed you. Mara, don't be dramatic. You embarrassed him." Diaz stopped the recording. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. I had made a choice. The audio file from that night had 2 parts. The first part was the threat I had just played for them. The second part, a split second later, was the sharp, percussive crack of her hand connecting with my face, followed by my sharp intake of breath. I had that sound. I had it isolated. I had it amplified. But I had not put it in the envelope. I didn't need their pity. Pity is a weak, emotional variable. It clouds judgment. It invites debate. Was she provoked? Was it really that hard? But a threat? An executive actively ordering a subordinate not to report harassment to human resources? That is not a variable. It is a fact. It is a data point that is clean, absolute, and terminal. I didn't need them to feel sorry for me. I needed them to act. I supplied only the data required to achieve the objective. My father had been silent this entire time. He had been staring at the printouts, staring at the evidence of the affair, the evidence of the fraud, the evidence of the lie he had told himself, the lie he had repeated to me, to keep the surface smooth. He looked up from the photo of Evan's hand on Celia's waist. His eyes traveled the length of the table and locked on mine. He wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at me. Really looking at me. For the first time in months. And he was seeing a stranger. A cold, meticulous analyst who lived in his house. A stranger who had just calmly, and with extreme prejudice, dismantled his entire life, his marriage, and his reputation, simply because it was the logical thing to do. In his eyes, I saw a dawning, terrible realization that he owed this stranger an apology he could never, ever bring himself to give. "Mara," he said. His voice was thick, broken, just my name. I held his gaze. My pulse was steady. My eyes were dry. "I just did my job," I said. My voice was not apologetic. It was not triumphant. It was not emotional. It was a statement of function. I identified a systemic risk to the company, and I neutralized it. My father flinched, as if I had struck him. He looked away, back down at the evidence of his wife's betrayal. A broken man. Diaz nodded once, a gesture of grim respect. "Indeed. Thank you. Ms. Kent, that will be all. Please return to your desk. You will await further instruction. You will not discuss this matter with anyone." "Of course," I said. I stood, straightened my suit jacket, and walked out of the boardroom, leaving my father alone at the table with the wreckage. I returned to the 41st floor. The entire building was in a state of suspended animation. The live stream had been cut. The anonymous Q&A board had been shut down, but the rumors were spreading faster than any broadcast. My phone buzzed, an all-company. High-priority email had just been sent from the board of directors. Subject: Update. Legacy Week program. Due to an unforeseen technical matter that arose during the Lessons in Integrity broadcast, the remainder of the Legacy Week program is postponed. We are pausing for a 15-minute administrative review. We appreciate your patience. 15 minutes, the exact pause they'd announced in the auditorium. I looked at the email. Unforeseen technical matter. I thought of the data, the audio file, the timelines, the cameras. The technical matter was the truth. The 15-minute administrative pause felt like an eternity. The auditorium was a pressurized chamber, filled with the sound of 500 people whispering, checking their phones, and looking toward the front row. The doors had been secured. No one was leaving. On the stage, the chairman of the board, a severe man named Harrison, had been in a tight, furious huddle with General Counsel Diaz and 2 other board members. My father was not among them. He sat alone, a solitary figure, staring at the blank, 30-foot screen, looking like a man who had just survived a plane crash. Celia and Evan were still in their seats, trapped. 2 security officers stood, arms crossed, at the end of their aisle. They were not prisoners, not yet. They were assets being managed. Then, Harrison broke from the huddle. He walked to the main lectern. The hot white light snapped back on. The red light on the broadcast camera glowed to life. The feed was back online. The technical difficulty was resolved. "We are back," Harrison said. His voice was grim. He was holding a single sheet of paper. He was not a PR man. He was a financier, and he looked sick. "The board of directors has held an emergency session. We have reviewed the irregularities presented by Ms. Kent. We have also reviewed the corroborating evidence packet supplied to internal audit." He put on his glasses. He was reading a legal statement. "Effective immediately, Ms. Celia Vance is suspended from all duties at Norcrest Dynamics, pending the outcome of a full, independent, external investigation." A sharp collective gasp filled the room. "Furthermore," Harrison continued, his voice hammering the words, "all contracts with the entities E. Monroe Creative LLC and Evan Moore are frozen, effective immediately. Mr. Moore will be detained on premises to cooperate fully with our audit and legal teams." The camera panned, just as I knew it would, to Celia. She was not looking at the chairman. She was not looking at the camera. She was staring at my father. Her face, a mask of ruin, twisted. "Richard?" Her voice was a raw, desperate whisper, but the sensitive stage mics caught it and amplified it throughout the room. It was the sound of a queen betrayed. "Richard? You're just going to sit there? You're going to side with her?" Every eye in the room, every eye on the broadcast, swung from Celia to my father. He was pinned in a spotlight of his own making. He had built his career on her image, on her narrative. He was the man who believed in surfaces. He visibly trembled. He looked at his hands. He looked at the floor. He did not look at her. He did not answer. His silence was her execution. Harrison looked at me. Ms. Kent, General Counsel informs me you have one final data point regarding the corporate card expenditures. Please present it. I stood. I walked back to the small podium. I was the only person in the room whose heart rate was steady. I was just finishing my report. Thank you. Mr. Chairman. The black LED screen flickered, coming back to life at my command. We have already established the fraudulent billing from the Shell LLC. We have established those payments correlate to hotel stays booked under the E. Monroe alias. But Mr. Moore also possessed a Norcrest Corporate American Express card, issued for vendor travel and expenses. I clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. It was not a graph. It was a simple, ugly screenshot of an expense report from our internal system. Line item, date, vendor, the Willow Bend Hotel, amount, $845.12. Expense category, client entertainment, submitted by E. Moore, approved by C. Vance. This, I said, my voice cold and precise, is for a separate 2-night stay. It was not billed to the fraudulent LLC. It was billed directly to the company. The category selected, as you can see, was client entertainment. I let the phrase hang in the air. This raises a final, critical compliance question. I said, who, or what, was being entertained at corporate expense? What client was being hosted in room 1427? Celia let out a small, choked sound. I clicked the remote one last time. And that, I said, brings us to the final exhibit, the why, the conclusive, undisclosed, executive conflict of interest. The screen changed. It was the mirror photo. It filled the 30-foot screen, a high-resolution, black-and-white monolith. It was not an analytical slide. There was no red circle, no text box, no data points, just the image, just Evan, holding the camera, just Celia, looking away with that secret, knowing smile, just his hand, splayed possessively across her waist, his thumb hooked into the silk of her dress. It was a photo of two lovers, taken by one of them, in a moment of private arrogance. I did not speak. The room was so quiet. I could hear the hum of the cooling fans in the broadcast truck outside. It was the sound of 5,000 people processing the truth, the cousin, the fraud, the shell company, the hotel rooms, client entertainment, and now this. The whispers started. A low, sibilant rush, the sound of 1,000, I knew it's, 1,000, did you see? It was the sound of the gossip becoming fact, of the narrative collapsing in on itself. No! The shriek was so loud, so raw. It shocked the room back into silence. Celia was on her feet. Her fists were clenched. The mask of porcelain was gone, shattered, and pure. Primal rage was underneath. It's fake! She screamed, pointing a trembling finger at her own 30-foot image. It's photoshopped! She did this! She's a liar! She faked it all! She was hysterical, appealing to anyone who would listen. Richard, tell them! It's a lie. It's photoshopped. From the side of the stage, General Counsel Diaz stepped forward, her face like stone. She took the lectern from the chairman. Ms. Vance, Diaz said, her voice cutting through the hysteria, a blade of pure, cold law. The legal department, in conjunction with internal audit, was provided the original source file for this image from Ms. Kent's evidentiary packet. Diaz paused, letting her words settle. We have verified the metadata, she announced to the room. The photo is authentic, the timestamp is authentic, the camera's digital signature is authentic. It was taken by Mr. Moore's camera at the time and date specified in the report. It was over. The word metadata was the final nail. Celia crumpled, as if her spine had been removed. She fell back into her chair, her hands covering her face, her sobs now audible. Beside her, Evan Moore stood up. He looked pale, small. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his hands half raised. I just, I'm sorry." It was pathetic. It was unclear who he was apologizing to. To Celia? For her ruin? To the board? For getting caught? It didn't matter. It was the sound of a rat trapped. I looked at the scene, the sobbing executive, the terrified con man, the grim-faced board, the stunned audience. My work was done. I stepped back to the small podium. I closed the slim black binder that held my notes. The snap of the rings was loud, final. I leaned into the microphone. "In my field, we build controls for every variable. We build firewalls. We write policy. We run audits. We try to control for everything, except for human choice." I looked at the glowing red light of the broadcast camera. "Transparency," I said, my voice clear and carrying, "is always a choice, but for those who hold power, it is also a non-negotiable requirement. This is the lesson. The demonstration is over." I switched off my microphone. I turned and walked off the stage. I had to pass the front row to get to the aisle. I had to pass my father. He was still sitting there, a statue of a man, hollowed out by the truth. As I drew level with him, he stood up. He looked at me. His face was a ruin of shame, of shock, of a terrible, newfound respect. He saw the stranger who had lived in his house. He saw the analyst who had just saved his company by destroying his life. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand, very slowly, almost trembling, and he placed it on my shoulder. It was light, a ghost of a touch, a fragile, desperate, dying second attempt at an alliance. It was the first time in his entire life he had ever, in public, chosen me. He had stepped out of the shadow of her lie and into the harsh, unforgiving light of my data. I did not stop. I did not lean into the touch. I did not acknowledge it. I registered it as the final data point of the day. I walked past him. I walked up the main aisle, against the current of security officers and shocked executives now rising from their seats. I walked out of the auditorium. I did not go back to my desk. I went to the elevator, my heels clicking on the marble. The only sound in my world. I took out my personal phone. I opened a new email. To Richard Kent. Subject, notice. "I am vacating the premises by 5 p.m. today. Please arrange for my personal effects to be boxed and sent to my office. I will no longer be residing at your address." I hit send. His hand on my shoulder wasn't a repair. It was a confirmation of the breach. There were no more roles for me to play on that stage. The dutiful daughter, the quiet data girl, the prop for their model family. The performance was over. 1 hour later, I was at my desk on the 41st floor. The building was in lockdown, not a physical lockdown, but a corporate one. The elevators were restricted to security and executive access. The internal chat systems were offline. My screen lit up, an all-company email from the board of directors. Subject, organizational update. Following a swift and thorough review by the board, Ms. Celia Vance's employment with Norcrest Dynamics has been terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and violation of the corporate code of conduct, including significant conflicts of interest. Mr. Evan Moore's vendor contracts are voided. An external auditor will be retained to conduct a full review of the communications group and all related contracts. It was sterile, bloodless, an execution notice, distributed to 5,000 inboxes. My corporate phone rang, not buzzed, rang. It was DS, from legal. "Kent?" Her voice was exhausted. "Yes. We're killing Legacy Week. The entire campaign. It's radioactive, but we need a final public-facing statement, a final email to all staff to close the loop. The board wants you to write it." Of course they did. The executioner was now the eulogist. The risk analyst was now the voice of the brand. "It needs to be final. Mara," she said. "Close this, now." "I'll send it in 5 minutes," I said, and hung up. I opened a new draft. I addressed it to All Staff Global. Subject, A final note on legacy. I typed. Today, our company faced a severe test of its internal controls. The system failed. It was compromised by individuals who prioritized personal relationships over corporate integrity. We have taken decisive, immediate, and public action. The true legacy of any company is not the history it writes about itself. Real legacy is the ability and the willingness to correct its own errors in public. We now begin that work. It was clean. It was cold. It closed the loop. I paused. My finger hovered over the send button. I thought about the anonymous questions, the whispers, the culture of silence Celia had built. I added one more line at the bottom, a signature that wasn't my name. If you have been silenced, find the data keeper. I hit send. For a moment. Silence. Then, my other monitor, the one still logged into the back end of the anonymous Q&A tool, began to flash. The portal, which now routed directly to internal audit, was supposed to be dormant. It was not. A new report. Subject: vendor kickbacks. Marketing debt? Another. Subject: falsified expense reports, 2023. Another. Subject: HR complaint. Suppressed by C. Vance. One after another. They flooded in. More than 30 in 10 minutes. The dam had broken. The data keepers were coming out of the shadows. I logged out. I gathered my things. The lobby was a morgue. Security was everywhere. As I walked toward the main revolving doors, I saw them, through the 30-foot glass walls, the satellite trucks, KGRY-4, Channel 7 News, the local business journals. They were camped on the sidewalk, microphones out, cameras aimed at the entrance. They smelled the blood in the water. They saw me, a woman in a dark suit, walking alone. They surged forward as I pushed through the glass door. "Miss Kent, is it true Celia Vance was fired?" "Mara, were you the one who exposed her? What's happening at Norcrest?" I did not break stride. I did not look at them. I looked through them. "No comment," I said to no one. I walked through the wall of cameras as if they were mist, my face a neutral mask, my footsteps the only sound I heard. As I reached the curb to wait for my car, I glanced at the C-suite executive garage, the private exit. A black town car was idling. A figure emerged from the side door, flanked by a single guard. It was Celia. She was wearing oversized black sunglasses, the kind celebrities wear at funerals. They covered half her face. She was no longer the radiant queen of the auditorium. She was just a woman in a cream-colored suit, exposed, diminished, her head ducked against the light. She had learned how to wear the dark on her face. It is a posture of absolute defeat. She got in the car, and it slid away into traffic, a ghost leaving the machine. A moment later, a second car, a standard corporate sedan, pulled up to the same door. Evan Moore was escorted out by 2 guards. He was not in handcuffs. This was a corporate matter, not yet a criminal one. He looked pale, rumpled, and terrified. He was clutching the dark brown calfskin wallet. I had instructed legal to have it returned to him. My evidence packet was already logged. The wallet itself was just an accessory. He was clutching the container of his own ruin. He was a man with nothing left but the artifact of his greed. He was put in the car, and it, too, disappeared. My own car arrived. I got in the back. The door closed, sealing me in quiet. Conditioned air. My personal phone buzzed. A text message. From my father. It was the first he had sent since I walked out of the auditorium. One line. "I'm sorry I didn't see. I see now." I read the words. He saw. He saw the fraud. He saw the affair. He saw the photo. He saw the data. He saw what I had showed him. I did not reply. What was there to say? I held my thumb over his name. I did not delete the conversation. I created a new folder in my secure message archive. I named it Retain. I moved his message into it. It was not forgiveness. It was a receipt. Another data point to be filed away. The car pulled away from the curb. I looked back at the Norcrest Tower one last time. In the massive, echoing lobby, the wall of legacy was dark. The giant LED screen that had, for weeks, been scrolling with the Legacy of Values tagline was blank. The project was dead. The feed was cut. All that was left was what had always been there. A 30-foot wall of cold, gray, structural concrete. The day did not end with the auditorium. The explosion was just the first step. The hours that followed were about containment, cleanup, and the methodical transfer of data. I spent the next 3 hours in Conference Room 17B. The room where I had recorded their confessions was now my debriefing station. Across the table from me were not board members. They were 2 men and a woman I had never seen before, introduced as the external forensic audit team from a firm in Washington, D.C. They had been brought in by Diaz the moment my email hit the server. They were the real data keepers. "Let's start from the beginning," Ms. Kent, the lead auditor said. Her name was Reyes. She spoke in the same flat, neutral tone as I did. "Your first point of contact with the anomaly." "January 14th, I said. "A vendor proposal from E. Monroe Creative LLC was flagged for executive-level fast-tracking by Ms. Celia Vance. The proposal was thin on metrics, heavy on abstract deliverables. I ran the EIN. It was a match for a social security number, not a registered corporation. That SSN belonged to an Evan Moore." "You logged this?" "I logged it in my initial risk assessment file. I did not escalate at that time. Without further data, it was simply an indicator of potential nepotism, a common, low-level compliance issue." "When did it escalate?" "Saturday night, at a private residence. Mr. Moore, the vendor, initiated unwanted physical contact. I reported this verbally to the executive sponsor, Ms. Vance." Reyes looked up from her laptop. What was her response? "She informed me I was dramatic and a liar. She ordered me not to report the incident to Human Resources. She then physically struck me. She framed this as a threat to family reputation. That was the escalation. The cover-up of harassment confirmed a high-level systemic risk." "You have a record of this?" "I do." I slid a USB drive across the table. This one was red. The legacy public file contained the audio of the threat. This drive contains the full, unedited audio from that night, including the sound of the physical impact, isolated and time-stamped. I did not include it in the crisis packet. Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "It was unnecessary data," I said. The threat to suppress an HR report was, by itself, a terminal violation. The other, it was an emotional data point. It would have clouded the issue. I am not here to report a personal assault. I am here to report a systemic failure of corporate controls. She nodded, a brief flicker of what might have been respect. "Understood. Let's move to the 17B recording." We spent an hour reviewing the footage. My audio recording from my coat. The 2 camera angles. We watched Evan's lunging grab for the wallet. We watched Celia's face when my email notification hit her phone. We watched her confirm the family narrative. "They confirmed everything," the auditor next to Reyes murmured. "Consciousness of guilt, aggression to destroy evidence, verbal confirmation of the cover-up." "Exactly," I said. "The test was designed to have them confess and demonstrate their own liability, which they did. The rest of the files you have, the financials, the hotel receipts, the signature matches, the metadata from the mirror photograph, the chain is complete." Reyes closed her laptop. "Thank you. Ms. Kent, your file is the most complete case of internal fraud I have seen in a decade. You have provided us with everything. We will take it from here." I stood. The data was no longer mine. It was theirs. The transfer was complete. My next meeting was back on the 50th floor. The boardroom was dark, the sun setting over Grayford, casting the room in long orange shadows. Only one man was waiting for me. Harrison, the chairman. He was standing by the window, looking down at the city. "They're calling you the Ice Queen," he said, not turning. "The analysts on 41. They said you didn't even blink." "Blinking is not part of my job description. Mr. Harrison?" He turned. His face was exhausted. but his eyes were sharp. "We're hemorrhaging. Kent, our stock is going to open in a nosedive tomorrow. The press is calling this a culture of corruption. Celia Vance was our brand. She was our integrity, and you proved she was a shell company, just like her lover." "She was a high-risk variable," I said. "She has been neutralized." "She has," he agreed. "Which leaves us with a vacuum, a credibility crisis. The board has approved an interim position, effective immediately. We're creating a new role. Chief Integrity Officer. It reports directly to me. No executive layer, total independence, total authority to audit anyone, anywhere, anytime." He paused. "The role is yours, if you want it." I looked at him. I processed the offer. Chief Integrity Officer, a C-suite title, a seat at the main table. It was a reward. It was also a strategy. They couldn't silence me. They couldn't fire me. So they would promote me. They would put the executioner on the board as a warning to everyone else. "I am a risk analyst, Mr. Harrison, not a corporate figurehead." "I'm not asking you to be a figurehead," he snapped. "I'm asking you to do what you just did. But for the whole company, I want you to be the ice. I want you to be the protocol. The message we send tomorrow cannot be, 'We're sorry.' It has to be, 'We are clean.' You are the only one here who is." I walked to the door. I did not want the title. I did not want the power. I had just finished the job I was paid to do. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my hand on the handle. I wasn't looking for a promotion. I was simply doing what my profession promises. I identify, analyze, and mitigate risk. The risk is mitigated. The demonstration is over. I left him in the dark. I walked out of the Norcrest Tower. The lobby was empty, smelling of marble and Windex. The night shift security guard nodded at me. As I stepped through the revolving doors, the cold night air hit my face. The last rays of the sunset shattered on the glass buildings around me. A cold, orange light. I saw my reflection in the dark glass of the door. My face, pale, tired, but clean. There was no bruise. There was no trace of the hot, stinging data point Celia had left on my cheek. The mark was gone. The evidence had been processed. All that was left was a smear of cold light on the glass. My car was waiting. I got in the back. "Where to, Ms. Kent?" the driver asked. I paused. I looked left, toward the highway that led to the hills, to my father's house, the house of curated surfaces and forced silence. "The Ethelred Building, downtown," I said. I had signed the lease on a sterile, empty, one-bedroom apartment 2 days ago, an address that held no history, a place that did not require me to be a prop. The car pulled into traffic. I did not look back. My personal phone vibrated in my hand. It was not my father. It was a news alert from the Grayford Business Journal. Breaking. Norcrest Dynamics. Fires, head of communications. Celia Vance. Amid allegations of fraud. Embezzlement. It was public. Truly public. The data was now in the wild. I opened my laptop. My desktop background was the image from the mirror. Evan's hand. Celia's smile. I had looked at it every day. A cold reminder of the objective. A data point I analyzed for motive, for arrogance, for the link. The file was closed. The case was complete. The data was no longer needed for analysis. I moved my cursor over the file. Right-click, delete. I opened the trash bin. Empty trash. The image vanished. I set my background to the Norcrest corporate default, a brushed gray, concrete logo. I was an analyst again. I opened my browser, LinkedIn. The Norcrest corporate page was already scrubbed. Every post about Legacy Week, every picture of Celia, every video had been erased. The entire campaign, her life's work, had been vaporized in under 3 hours. In its place, a new post, published 1 minute ago. It wasn't an apology, it was a statement. Integrity is not a slogan, it is a signed procedure. Today, we enforce the procedure. We are Norcrest Dynamics. I almost smiled. They had taken my email, my final line. "If you've been silenced, find the data keeper." They had twisted it, co-opted it, turned my act of compliance into their new brand identity. The machine was already repairing itself. It was absorbing the shock, reframing the narrative, and turning my cold data into their new, warm PR. They were, in their own way, brilliant. The car stopped. The Ethel read. I got out. I walked into the lobby. It was all glass and steel. Just like the office. It smelled new. I walked toward the main doors. They slid open with a soft, expensive, electronic ting. The sound of a system granting access. I stopped on the threshold. I thought of the slap in the dark. A private, emotional, violent act. I thought of the fraud. A secret, greedy act. I thought of the auditorium. The 30-foot screen. The live feed. I had taken their private secrets and made them public. Not for revenge. Revenge is an emotional, high-variable motive. It's messy. I did it for control. I did it because the only way to fix a corrupted system is to expose its data to the light, fully and without mercy. In public, I whispered, and I stepped through. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious to know where you're all tuning in from. Please drop a comment below. Let me know where in the world you are, and share your thoughts on the story. I'd love to chat with you. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if you really want to support the channel, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.